All right, guys. Here we are at the very end of this year, and this is what we've been preparing for the entire year, right? Since August 20th, first day of school, up until now, May 14th. We have come a long way, and thank you for being a part of my class. And I know um, it's been a good time. We've learned a lot. At least I hope we have. Um, and whatever you feel like you're at, whether you feel very prepared or not prepared at all, as long as you have given your best, that's all I ask for. So, um, yeah, don't stay up too late. Please get a good night's rest, especially if you are, going to be at school in the morning. I wouldn't know why you wouldn't be, but yeah, um, we hope that you will do your best on the test on the 15th. Well, on Friday, you met my fiance. Today, I would like you to meet my wife. Hey,
Hello.
any last words for them before they take the test?
Mm, Study hard. I don't remember how to study. I don't remember what to do. Sleep.
Make sure you have a good breakfast.
Make sure you wake up.
Yeah.
Don't feel rushed in the morning.
Yeah. Go over that green list that I gave you guys for like things to bring, not to bring. Yeah, no mechanical pencils. Make sure you bring a watch.
Don't feel stressed. It is what it is. So just be confident and own it. And I know you guys have a great teacher, so he probably taught you everything you need to know. So just remember everything he said and use the lectures and study hard. Don't stress.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I, I thought I needed to say a few other things, but yeah, it's fine. You guys got it. All right, here we go. Last lecture of the year. We're covering more of the socioeconomic changes that happen in the end. Cold War is more political. Look at how has Europe been able to achieve unity economically, politically, as a continent. If you remember, I talked about this last week, where this teacher's thesis, I'll read to you guys. While Europe seems to be moving beyond its cannibalistic past with the creation of the European Union, its most significant legacies come in the development of the welfare state liberalism, the decolonization of the Third World, and postmodern shift of the 20th century. Okay, so we'll be covering European Union. Also, we already talked about decolonization, but I'll touch upon the welfare state as well. Okay, so some of the things in just this lecture that I want you guys to think about is that coming out of World War II, okay, even though we went over Cold War and that was, like half a century long, as far as what happens after World War II, we did talk about with the Marshall Plan. There needed to be rebuilding of Europe. Europe had to recover economically. So let's look at the growth of their economy and how they could be not just coming back and being strong again as Europe once was, but how are they interdependent? How are they integrated with one another? When the European Union is established, is it a success? Is it, how strong is it? How weak is it? Also, as the welfare state becomes more popular throughout Europe, what are some of the challenges? Why is it that political integration is not as easy as economic integration? And also, what are the major social changes, mainly amongst women, centered around their role in society? Okay, so we're going to look at different nations, and not just nations, but also organizations. Okay, so the organizations that we're going to be looking at speak of this trend that's happening. So by the late 1900s, all European nations were affected by this trend of integration. Before, Europe was very separate. they would always compete. They would fight wars, right? They, wanted to achieve their own self-determination, have their own nation states, and so Europe's history has very much been very diverse, right? With all these different types of countries that we went over. Okay, they have different national identities, and wars have been fought, and they used to be kingdoms, and then they become modern states, and then nation states, and some of the things that they fought over were religion, right? Power, land, influence. And so after World War II, there's this whole new direction now of cooperation. So by cooperating with one another, not trying to fight each other, after two major world wars, it makes kind of sense of maybe we should try to seek peace in a different way. And so through cooperating with one another, we later can get even closer by integrating each other's economies and policies. So what is a supranational organization? What does supranational mean? Supranational means beyond the boundaries of a nation, beyond national boundaries. Okay, so we have the IMF. The IMF stands for the International Monetary Fund. Their main job today is to allow currencies to be exchanged amongst countries. Before, it was about just like providing loans, like short term, to struggling countries if they're in economic crisis, which a lot of them were after World War II. It really helped improve the economy after World War II. The reason why the IMF was established was because of the fear of the Great Depression for going on longer than it did, and that it would continue to affect other countries because the international economy was so closely tied together. Figure how do they prevent that? Okay, and then we also have the World Bank. They're actually different in purposes, but very similar in types of what we think they do, but they're actually very different. World Bank is more about long-term loans to countries. Their job is really to promote economic and social progress in developing countries, so countries that are still not fully industrialized, and helping raise their productivity so that the standard of living within that country could be better. That's really main, just to really help rebuild and reconstruct, where the other ones are more about currencies and short-term loans and long-term loans about developing the country. Okay, then we have the UN. We mentioned a little bit about the UN. The main point is that the UN is branching off of the agreement of the to have post-war peace after World War II at the Yalta Conference. And so the UN is very similar to the League of Nations, except it's more flexible, has better organization. And so how the UN is actually structured, there's a Security Council, and the Security Council has 12 countries, but 5 always remain. And the reason why these 5 always remain is because they are the winners. They're the allied powers of World War II. So we have the United States, Soviet Union, Great Britain, France, and China. These are the permanent members, and then the other 12 that kind of like rotate in. And so they represent like the main decision makers to maintain peace. And so a lot of the decisions they need to make are unanimous. The thing is that during the Cold War, obviously the U.S. and Soviet Union did not work well together because they're on opposite sides. Okay, so it's hard to keep peace for that period of time. Also, in addition to the Security Council, you have the General Assembly. So it's kind of like 2 major parts, and this is where every single country has like their own representative for the UN, and they're kind of advising, but not really doing much. They're really just giving their opinions based upon what is suggested to their country. From their point of view, and not only is it to keep peace, but they also wanted to help solve social, economic problems that are happening within each country, and providing an extension of that. Okay, so the best example of a supranational organization that's most successful, that is identified with the AP Euro course, is the European Union, because they have shown that Europe has integrated itself amongst different nations, altering their policies, and so that you can, and I'll go in detail about the European Union, but they're the example of what it means to go have an organization beyond its borders. So it's not just about the nation state being powerful now, it's about these organizations that are trending and becoming more popular and gaining influence. Okay, so let's see how Western Europe. Okay, we'll recover. We did cover Cold War. Cold War, very much Eastern Europe, but Western Europe after World War II, what happens? Well, we know that, much of the major cities in Europe have been hurt really badly, and so they're going through economic hardship. In World War One, yeah, there was a lot of damage, and I was very distraught. But I mean, it's really based upon trench warfare, and so most of the damage was done along where the trenches are, where World War II is very much throughout. And so you're going to see that food was scarce, inflation was high, and the economy was just bad. Um, Many people thought that the recovery was impossible for Europe because it was so bad. And where is it worse? It's actually the worst in Germany, because that's where the Nazis were taken out, and that's where Germany had to surrender. And so the Allies destroyed much of the country in order to defeat Hitler and the Nazis. Okay, so each European country that went through World War II has to recover in two ways. One is politically, the other one is economically. We'll first go over politically. We have this new political group called the Christian Democrats. They're going to come on scene, and they are not just in one country, but in several countries. And the reason why they are kind of popular is because they find that it's common amongst people to understand that they have a heritage that is very Christian and European, and democracy is something that people understand as what they want to hold on to, especially in the West, obviously, because that's what they're influenced by. In addition, fascist regimes in Italy, in Spain eventually, in Germany, they all have failed and they have fallen. So Christian Democrats, what do they stand for? Well, they reject absolute authority. Um, they um, they reject very extreme nationalism, but they are about democracy, about cooperation, and even open to some socialist uh, values, in the sense where a lot of reforms were going to come through the Christian Democrats. So this is the results, and that through these reforms, there's a lot of transformation that happens, and it's going to bring Europe back, or at least Western Europe, back on its feet. Okay. All right. Let's talk about France. Major important person, Charles de Gaulle, is going to be in charge of the Fourth Republic, and with this, the presidency at the time is not really that powerful. Eventually, a lot of socialist types of ideas, such as like having the government take over industries, making them nationalized, state-owned. Became popular in the Fourth, but then through him, he is most significant in the Fifth Republic. So that's what France is at today. They have their Fifth Republic, started in 1958, and this is where the president, because Charles de Gaulle himself wrote the Constitution for the Fifth Republic, he actually gave the president um, more power than the Legislative National Assembly. Okay, all right. Britain, just got to mention, they become more and more of a welfare state because the Labour Party. We talked about how the Liberals become the Labour Party. They are the ones to take over Parliament, and so what does welfare state mean? Well, it means that they're going to be providing, the government's going to be providing services, social services for its people. Okay, but we'll go over that in detail later. All right, so here's the kind of economic recovery part. So Europe at this time is going to transition to a more post-industrial type of economy, in the sense where that those people, the workers, right, part of the Industrial Revolution from before, they're like, they were before creating things of heavy industry, right? So they're creating like cars and clothing and like machinery, like tangible goods, real objects. But over time, after World War II, not they're not creating clothes and they're not creating cars, but they're shifting where people are now employed in jobs of the service sector. Okay, and so this is kind of where the first world is still what it's known for, is that it's promoting industries such as technology, healthcare, education, legal services, these things that are more like higher education requiring jobs. So if you look at the agricultural industry in Europe at this time, is going to shrink because it's a service sector, right? What are the services you can provide for people, not just the goods? Okay, all right. And then one major event is the economic miracle. So the economic miracle was a unseen economic growth that happened, and that Europe actually was able to recover and see some economic progress that would last for a couple of decades. And so in 1963, Western Europe is going to produce 2.5 times more goods than they did before the war. So even before the war, they're running the war machines, they would produce a lot. But there was this miracle that happened, and the reasons for it was, one, the Marshall Plan gave financial aid to Western European countries. Also, governments were willing to use money, to spend money while in debt in order to invest, to hope that they would begin to stimulate the economy. Also, they removed a lot of economic barriers of tariffs and stuff between nations, and that helped it a lot too. And overall, there's this thing just called a mixed economy that's very close associated to the welfare state, in the sense where you're having not a complete socialist economy, or a complete free market economy, capitalist economy, but it's kind of in between. It's kind of mixed. The government's going to be owning some of the industries that's going to be nationalized, but there's still private ownership. Okay, and so the main point is the government's getting more involved in providing social welfare, which means that this is where the welfare state is going to be established. So what characterizes the welfare state? So if a country is known as a welfare state, which many Western European countries are today, it means that they are going to provide these services such as employment services, like to help you find a job, or unemployment and disability insurance. So let's say if you're laid off, right, or you get hurt, you're injured, there is money to support you. You don't pay the bills all by yourself. Retirement for the elderly. We talked about this before, and we'll go into detail that after World War One, or even before World War One, when welfare began to kind of come on the scene, it was really just because people were poor and they demanded more from the government. They wanted reforms, right? But actually, this is where a lot of these services the government's providing now is coming not just for the poor, but for all people, for the masses, right? And so healthcare is going to be offered to everyone, and also kind of more taxes, so the wealth is redistributed more. The rich is getting taxed more, and so that's what I think America is going through right now, and what people are struggling with. People don't want to follow the Western European model. And that's what Obamacare is kind of like replicating, is that it's kind of a lot like a socialist idea, values and stuff, practice. And that's why people call Obama socialist, but they kind of generalize. They don't really know. We're not completely socialist, okay? Because one thing is the welfare state is actually going to reduce some class tensions. Class next to me is laughing. All right, anyways. Last thing I want to cover about how Western Europe was able to recover was immigration workers. So because of the economy improving, Western Europe did not have enough workers to equal the demands of the economy. So if people are demanding to produce this many goods because they're willing to buy it, but the supply is not there, it's because they're not producing it fast enough. So a lot of immigrants are coming from Eastern Europe, right? And they're coming from the Balkan area, so from Yugoslavia, from Greece, from Turkey, even from North Africa. They're all immigrating to Western Europe, and they're working there. And they're not just working there and leaving, but they're staying there to assimilate. And so you're going to see this huge kind of like, not huge jump, but like you're going to see a significant increase in immigrant population. And it's going to be kind of like, okay, some people are going to be very resentful because they're very nationalist, and it's affecting kind of the overall culture and population. Okay. Let's see. All right, so how are we actually seeing, after they recover, how are we actually going to see Europe actually become more united? Well, unity is going to come through three categories: political, military, and economic. And so for economic, this is going to be the most successful development for unity, whereas political is still in the works, and military not as much, although the UN is something that is at work, and it is still stable in the sense where it did not die out like the League of Nations. Okay, but there is no actual European military organization. There is NATO still, but not to the point where it's really active. Okay, all right. So let's talk about economics then. You have the ECSC, European Coal and Steel Community. This is part of crash course that really emphasizes this. This is where the big six, okay, we have West Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg are part of the big six. They are trying to create an organization that will help improve and protect the steel and coal production that's happening. And so their goal really, here are the big six, sorry. Their goal really is to have one market that is not competing with each other within these six, but they're working together so there's no national tariffs or quotas and that kind of stuff, and they're protecting each other. Um, their end goal that they had before is the long-term goal is more about being so closely tied economically that war would not happen amongst them because they are, so closely integrated. That didn't come yet, but we're going to see that the ECSC is going to develop into the EEC, right? So just think the coal and steel is basically just one sector, one industry, but then the EEC, the European Economic Community, is talking about just throughout all industries. And so this is going to be established because of the Treaty of Rome. This comes in 1957. This is where the same big six, they are going to, major six, they're going to reduce all tariffs amongst each other, and they're going to create one single market. So by combining together now, they are kind of one organization that is almost as wealthy and large as the United States. So that's the Treaty of Rome that was able to establish that. They now have common economic policies, and they're hoping to not just have economic union but also political union. In contrast, we have COMCON, which is where the communist states during this time, because the Cold War is still going on, they respond by creating their own economic group called COMCON. Okay, and then coming out of the EEC, the European Economic Community, then we have the European Union, and this is where they wanted to extend and change the common market to be even greater in the sense of what it's able to accomplish by creating one single European currency, which is the euro, which is mainly used throughout Europe today in those countries of the EU. The only really big exception is the United Kingdom. Great Britain uses the pound still. Okay, so why did the EC become the European Union? Is because of the Maastricht Treaty in 1991. This is what revised the common market, and the main point is that the euro is a single currency now, and at that time there was only 12 nations of the EU, but now we're looking at 27 in 2009. So the European Union is pretty complicated. It has a political and military and economic really like type of plan of how it's structured, as a judicial branch too, and this really separated in how it goes out. I don't think it really matters to the structure to you guys, but just to understand that like it's a collective effort. That's what a union is supposed to be, but it still has its struggles. So the question is, how successful is the European Union? Well, early on when it just had 12, it was pretty good. It went from 6 to 12, but now it's at 27. And the reason why it has struggles is because, with the original 6 and 12, maybe you have a shared policy and structure that would work with you. But, with the more countries that you add to the European Union, you have this thing called enlargement fatigue. And what that means is that with enlargement fatigue, the larger you get, the more exhausting, the more difficult it becomes to maintain things. And so another struggle that is going to happen is that because you're expanding, going into Eastern Europe, all of these countries used to be communist, and their economies are very weak, especially at the fall of the Soviet Union, and so they don't really contribute much, and they're kind of like more of a hassle to integrate than anything. Okay, all right, let's go over social changes very quickly. Very simply, we need to focus on the middle class coming out of World War II, because what we call the baby boomer generation is that their opportunities for higher education is what makes them able to become a stronger middle class in this sense. They're going to be more skilled, more educated. They're going to focus more on democracy, and the class structure is not going to be as rigid because of the welfare state. And so um, Europe's going to have rapid industrial and technological expansion. We talked about that. And so that means that companies and corporations are going to need more managers in the service sector, right? And people that are specializing in certain skills and services. And so they're trained now. They're not just like, manual laborers, okay? And so because they have that wealth, they can actually, invest and provide more opportunity for their children and so on and so forth. Um, okay, consumerism, it's pretty simple what that is, right? That people are now having a more access to a consumerist lifestyle, and also globalization is where cross cultures are being shared and goods are being shared, ideas are being shared, um, even faster, right? So you have the internet being developed, right? You have things that are sent because technology has improved, and so globalization is kind of taking over the world, even today. All right, let's go over women's movements very quickly because women are very important. Let's remember, okay, the early women's rights advocates came from French Revolution, Enlightenment. They demanded, Mary Wollstonecraft, they demanded equality and Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, Women and Citizen, listing rights, okay, equality, not suffrage, just equality, right? Just equality at that time. And then we have late 19th century, early 20th century, right? End of the 1800s, early 1900s, where we have Fawcett and Emmeline Pankhurst. They are supporting the women's suffrage movement. And then after World War One, we see Great Britain, Germany, Soviet Union, some Scandinavian states. They are given their women, like in 1918 to 1930, they have suffrage as well. And then under the fascist regimes of Italy and Germany, women are now kind of put back into the traditional role of caretaker at home. Okay, so the flow of women, for the most part, have always been that they have been gaining more privileges and more rights. After World War II, we're going to see that most women are going to actually marry earlier, and they're going to get back into the more domestic role, and this is kind of going to affect kind of like how they are seen too. Okay, other developments that are an important part of this time period is contraceptives, birth control, and abortion. It's controversial of whether or not women should use it at that time. Nowadays, it's pretty common, but at times there's still things where not all countries are open to legalize abortions, and the U.S. has its own policies that's struggling over that. Um, but one thing to know, I think generally that is important, is that birth rates in Europe is actually going to drop to the point where there isn't a huge population growth from just Europeans. The only way like population growth is happening in a lot of countries now in Europe is because of immigration, not because of their own people. So basically, if mom and dad, right, each have 2 kids, that means that they're sustaining population, because once mom and dad die, right, you have 2 kids that just replace those 2 people. If from before, right, when mom and dad had like 4 kids, they're actually multiplying the population, and it's actually growing. There are places like Italy that have negative population growth, where they're only having 1 kid or 0 kids, and so that's a kind of a trend that's happening with kind of the birth rates and the overall population. Um, Contraception, the fact that it's developed and it's more widely used, less likely to have kids. Okay, all right. Simone de Beauvoir, she wrote The Second Sex in 1949. She argued that women were, in essence, free. However, they've always been trapped, and inflexible because of the conditions around them. And so, the only by actions that are very courageous and being very self-assertive can women escape this inferior role that they've always been held down to. And so, why is she significant? Well, what she said is not really like not wow and shocking, but it really inspired other people. Okay, and so one lady named Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, she's arguing, who is influenced by Beauvoir, that middle class women were trapped in their domestic roles and they should not be held to like conform to these roles. It's not necessary for them to, and so she'll like speak against that. She'll create NOW, National Organization for Women, and so. Yeah, the goals of women's rights movements towards this time period, towards present day, is that um, they don't want to be discriminated anymore in a very practical way. Before, it was like we need to have suffrage, we need to have the ability to vote, right? But now it's now that they are recognized as kind of more equal. What is now unequal? Well, pay, right? Women are not always paid as much, and so one thing that they demand is equal pay for equal work. Also, some family rights, right? Whether or not abortion should be the decision of the woman or the consensual family between parents, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. Basically, the feminist movement has switched away so much from just focusing on women, but has expanded to other reform movements such as like environmentalism, gay rights, and poverty, and that's what women have been supporting. Okay, well, that's the last lecture. It seems a little long, but it's a good overview and understanding what's going on overall. Yeah, the test is tomorrow, and I think you guys have been working hard this year. Um, you guys can do it. Don't stress about it. Yeah, please review and yeah, talk to each other. Email me if you have questions. But for the most part, make sure you look at some of your note cards, be familiar with it, go through Crash Course, and get a good night's rest. All right. Okay. Good luck, guys.